Yesterday, the United States carried out a series of airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen in response to the Houthis targeting commercial shipping and military vessels in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. Now, in today's video, we're going to talk about what exactly transpired over the last 24 hours to include some of the strike footage. We'll then get into who exactly the Houthis are and why the United States is attacking them, and of course, wrapping up with what to expect going forward. Now, in terms of a battle damage assessment from these strikes, it's a little bit mixed at this point. The Yemen Ministry of Health, which is Houthi run, said that 32 people were killed, 101 wounded, and they say most of those were women and children. Saudi reports right now are saying that there may have been some senior Houthi leadership included in those numbers, but they haven't yet been able to give names. Now, President Trump yesterday confirmed this, putting out a statement that's long, and I'm just going to grab a couple clips from it, but this and everything else will be linked in the description if you want to read it in its entirety. Trump said, quote, "Today I have ordered the United States military to launch decisive and powerful military action against the Houthi terrorists in Yemen. They have waged an unrelenting campaign of piracy, violence, and terrorism against American and other ships, aircraft, and drones. Joe Biden's response was pathetically weak. So the unrestrained Houthis just kept going." And we are going to talk about the response under the Biden administration towards the second half of this video. He said, "Our brave warfighters are now carrying out aerial attacks on the terrorists' bases, leaders, and missile defenses to protect American shipping, air, and naval assets, and to restore navigational freedom." Trump said to all Houthi terrorists, "Your time is up, and your attacks must stop. Starting today, if they don't, hell will rain down upon you like nothing you have ever seen before." He also issued a statement to Iran saying support for the Houthi terrorists must end immediately. Do not threaten the American people, their president, who has received one of the largest mandates in presidential history, or worldwide shipping lanes. If you do, beware, because America will hold you fully accountable, and we won't be nice about it. Now, from our understanding, at this point, the Houthi attacks, or the attacks on the Houthis, were carried out by fighter jets from the Harry S. Truman aircraft carrier, which is currently stationed in the northern Red Sea, as well as Air Force assets, manned and unmanned aircraft launched from a variety of bases in the general region. Turning over to the Pentagon spokesperson, Sean Parnell, he put out a statement saying, quote, "The Houthis have attacked U.S. warships 174 times and commercial vessels 145 times since 2023. They put American lives at risk. The previous administration let this go on for years with next to no response. Under President Trump and Secretary Hegseth's leadership, that ends now." And then a senior official speaking to ABC News stressed that this is expected to not be a single-day event, but this will be, quote, decisive. And that's something we're going to come back to here a couple times, because decisive action against the Houthis is going to take a lot more than 1, 2, even 3 days worth of bombings. So again, the battle damage assessment right now is a little bit mixed. The United States did not lose any aircraft or personnel in this attack. We understand that 32 were killed and 101 injured. The spokesperson for the Yemen Ministry of Health, Anas al-Asbari, said that most of the casualties were, quote, women and children. And then the Saudi Al Arabia network claims that among the dead are 6 senior Houthi officials, but they have no verification on this report, and at this time, no names have been provided. Now, turning to a little bit of information about the Houthis here. Look, overall, not a good organization, bad group of dudes, a designated foreign terrorist organization here in the United States now. That was a list that they were on. The Biden administration removed them from that list with the hopes that the Houthis would come to the table and play nice, if you will. That didn't work. They kept doing their terroristy stuff. So the Trump administration just a few weeks ago added them back to that list. Now, a little overview on the Houthis. I will link a couple videos in the description below. One where I talk about kind of in depth who this organization is, where they come from, and another talking about why I think Trump is probably going to carry out strikes against the Houthis pretty early in his administration. Now, the Houthis are also known as Ansar Allah. It's a Shia political military organization in Yemen, and it's worth noting that the Houthis are not the Yemeni government. So I'm going to pull up a map here to give you a bit of an idea of the territory we're talking about. This is live UA map. It's pretty accurate, all things considered. So when we zoom in here, you'll see the western portion of Yemen that is red. This is Houthi-controlled territory. So the rest is kind of a mix. You've got the Republic of Yemen over here as well. Big picture, there's been a civil war raging in Yemen since 2014. Technically, it's still ongoing, and it's a divided country. Now, the reason that the Houthis have as much power as they do is the vast majority, something like 60% of Yemen's population, resides in this area that is red. Now, another reason that the Houthis' territorial control is important is if you look at this shipping lane. See where it gets narrow? Coming down here through the Red Sea? This is where they've been attacking shipping. So you can see how they've got We'll get into this here in a moment, but they have the firepower to range anything in this area, and that's effectively what they've worked to shut down in recent attacks. Now, the Houthis, their flag, I should mention, we have to talk about this because you'll see it waved in all of their propaganda videos. Just to be clear on this one, that flag says, quote, "God is the greatest, death to America, death to Israel, curse be upon the Jews, and victory to Islam." So, no friend of the United States, not by a long shot. Now, when we look at the series of attacks that have been carried out by the Houthis, really this began back on November 8th, 2023. So we'll pull up a map here. This also will be linked in the description below. It's ACLED data, and it does a pretty good job laying out all of the various attacks carried out by the Houthis. And you can see how they've just got this stranglehold on anything having to come through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is right through here. This chart shows every one of the attacks carried out against commercial as well as military vessels. Pretty solid resource here. But I should mention that according to that chart, the Houthis haven't carried out an attack against commercial shipping or military vessels since back in November of 2024. So these attacks went on for about a year. They started on November 8th, 2023. And the Houthis said they were doing this in support of the Palestinian people in Gaza. Now, the Houthis at this point have been pretty consistent in their messaging, not all that consistent in their targeting. In their messaging, the reason I say that is they were then, and they still today, and we'll get to the Houthi statements around this attack, are saying that they are doing all of this in support of the Palestinian people in Gaza until the siege of Gaza is lifted. And in this particular instance, they will continue to carry out attacks until humanitarian aid is allowed in the Gaza Strip. The Houthis have been very consistent in that messaging. Their targeting is a different story. So there have been 65 different countries directly affected by these Houthi strikes, to include Russia, China, and even their major backer, Iran. So on February 23rd of 2023, I believe, there was a Greek ship that was taking materials from Brazil to Iran that was targeted and damaged by a Houthi missile. So Greek ship from Brazil to Iran, but the Houthis' big claim here is that they're only striking Israeli ships, American or British ships, and then at times they've expanded it out to be any ships moving to or from American, British, or Israeli ports. Clearly, their targeting data is a little off, and what we've seen in response to this is a significant fall off of global shipping moving through that area, one of the major pipelines, one of the major transit routes, if you will, around the world. So the Houthis have had a significant impact on shipping, even though they have kind of stopped as of late. Now, while they've technically stopped, there has still been other activity. The Houthis, about a month ago, fired surface-to-air missiles at U.S. F-16s operating in the region. And then just a few weeks ago, they actually shot down what I think is their 15th U.S. Reaper drone. Again, I haven't seen an official statement from the United States on that one, but we do have footage from the Houthis, and they have shot down a fair number of U.S. drones in the past. They do have significant surface-to-air capabilities. Now, again, the Houthis haven't, while they have stopped technically attacking commercial shipping in recent months, this is the longest stretch since they began back in November of 23, they did just over the course of the last week say, we're actually going to start again. And they say this because they say that Israel has not allowed the shipment of humanitarian aid to flow into Gaza. They gave warnings, a 72, 48, and 24-hour warning. And then eventually on March 11th, so just a couple days ago, they issued a statement saying, first, they resumed the ban on the passage of Israeli ships in the designated operation zone in the Red and Arabian Seas. This ban will take effect from the time this issued is issued. Any Israeli ship attempting to violate this ban shall be targeted. And then, of course, this ban shall continue until crossings to the Gaza Strip are reopened and aid, food, and medicine are allowed back in. So I think that's an important distinction here. The Houthis have laid off targeting commercial vessels for a few months now, but they did just say, we're going to get back to it. So something to keep in mind here. It looks like the United States, the timing here might have been kind of preempting what they viewed as the Houthis getting back to striking some of these vessels. Now, turning to the official Houthi responses here that they published on their Telegram channel, they said, quote, the American-British aggression confirms that America was and still is fighting on behalf of the Zionist entity. And that's pretty normal for Houthi statements. And in this case, I should note that by all accounts, this was a unilateral United States mission. We've had previous missions where there's been quite a few different countries involved, and the UK has carried out strikes of their own, and of course, Israel as well. In this case, everything we're seeing, it was simply the United States. In fact, my understanding is the UK actually sent a message to Yemen saying the UK is not involved in the strikes and Yemen will not intervene. This is a unilateral American effort. And again, all indications are unilateral American in this case. But the Houthis continued, saying the U.S.-British aggression against Yemen came against the backdrop of Yemen's supportive stance towards the Palestinian people. The aggression will not deter Yemen from continuing to support Palestine and fulfilling its duties in supporting Gaza. The aggression will not pass without a response, and our Yemeni armed forces are fully prepared to confront escalation with escalation. So a couple key takeaways there. One, they're saying that's not enough. We're not going to stop. And not just that, we are going to retaliate now, possibly against U.S. ships in the region, maybe American bases in the Middle East, but we'll get more to that here in a second when it comes to what to expect coming next. Now, if you recall, one of Trump's comments there was that this was a signal to Iran. He put that out in the same statement, and we have seen some analysts today saying that as well, that this is less about the Houthis and more about signaling to Iran, which take that with a grain of salt. This is very much about the Houthis in a lot of ways. But the commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps did put out a statement yesterday. This is Major General Hossein Salami, who said, quote, "We reject Trump's accusations against us regarding Yemen, and we have always declared that the Yemeni people are a free and independent people who pursue independent national policies." Now, in terms of the Yemeni people being free and independent, this is something that that Iran has hit on time and time again to say, look, it's the Houthis that make their decisions. We don't direct any of this, which is questionable to say the least. But something that I think was worth highlighting here that kind of plays into this story as a whole is the Iranian shipment of weapons to the Houthis. The Houthis are operating a mix of some are just straight up Iranian weapon systems, and others are just like exact replicas. So the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, kind of the CIA of the Defense Department, put out some graphics not long ago that I'll link this report. It's really cool that this is unclassified, but they show on this in this graphic here, you've got the Iranian system on the right and then the Houthi system on the left, and like they are the exact same. And in a lot of cases, we found there have been Houthi munitions that have been recovered with Iranian components inside of them. So it's a mix. Sometimes these weapon systems are being shipped to the Houthis in parts and being assembled in Yemen. There's other indications that the Houthis might be manufacturing some of this themselves. But either way, every one of these weapon systems, just across the board, from drones to missiles, surface-to-air missiles, everything, ballistic missiles, everything is just like a one-for-one replica of Iran. So yes, the Houthis might make their own decisions to a degree, but it's hard not to see the direct Iranian influence here, to include the Iranian assistance with targeting. They do have a ship in the Gulf of Aden that is believed to be assisting with targeting. Now, in terms of what comes next, personally, what I think we're probably going to see here is an increase in strikes against Houthi leadership. Under the Biden administration, we saw a lot of focus on weapons and equipment, so a lot of preemptive type strikes. And there were a couple that were carried out to try to overall degrade the Houthi capability. Clearly, none of that did a good job of deterring the Houthis. There was never a single case where strikes were carried out and then the Houthis just went silent after that at all. So again, a lot of the Biden administration strikes or U.S. strikes under the Biden administration were focused on radar sites, missile launch sites, drone launch locations, things like that. Notably, we had aircraft overhead and they would be monitoring the Yemen coast, and when they would see a drone pulled out for launch, the U.S. would carry out a strike. So a lot of like waiting for the action to be taken, responsive, if you will. The Israelis, however, have carried out a couple waves of strikes against the Houthis that do appear to have had a little longer-term impact. They went more after infrastructure and port facilities, which, of course, is a major way that the Houthis are getting their hands on Iranian weapon systems. So the Israeli response did a little bit more. However, big picture, all of that combined didn't deter the Houthis. So the one thing that we haven't really done yet from a U.S. or Israeli perspective, anybody, or the U.K., anybody involved in these strikes, is we haven't gone after Houthi leadership. We'll see if that actually gets the job done, but that is a lever that has yet to be pulled, and it sounds like that might be what the Trump administration was going after yesterday. Now, the Atlantic Council, a U.S.-based think tank, put out a series of opinions on what to expect going forward, and I thought this was worth running through here because this publication came out last night, just after they went around asking a bunch of experts, what's going to happen now in Yemen that the U.S. is back striking Houthi targets? A couple here worth mentioning. Emily Milliken said, quote, the group will likely, the Houthis, will likely relaunch or launch a retaliatory strike, potentially on the USS Truman strike group in the Red Sea or U.S. bases in the region, in an attempt to demonstrate to Yemenis living under their control, their backers in Tehran, and the wider international community that they remain undeterred by U.S. operations. And the Houthis did kind of suggest that, say, hey, retaliation is coming, escalation for escalation. We'll see. Andrew Birney said, quote, history suggests that without a more comprehensive allied approach to the Houthi-Iran connection, airstrikes alone won't be enough to push the Houthis out of Yemen or restore stability to one of the world's most vital trade routes. I generally agree with that. Something we spoke about earlier in the video. Airstrikes alone is not going to solve this problem, at least what we've seen so far. If it is going to be resolved exclusively by airstrikes, we are about to see a campaign that we probably haven't seen unfold since shock and awe back in 2003. And then lastly here, Thomas Warwick said, quote, the biggest risk for both the United States and the Houthis is that no amount of destruction, short of targeting both the Houthi leadership and its military capabilities, may actually achieve what the Trump administration wants. A few days of strikes will probably not bring an end to the Houthis' attacks unless the Trump administration is prepared to go even further. Now, a major issue here, again, if we pull back up the map of Yemen, it's not just a matter of killing their leadership or destroying certain launch facilities. You have to look at the overwatch that the Houthis have over the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. And they're not destroying every single ship that comes through here. They're not even targeting. Even at the peak of their strikes, they weren't targeting every ship that went through here. But that doesn't matter. When you're a shipping company or a captain of one of these ships, you have to make that determination. Is it worth, what's the risk you're willing to take? Is it 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10? And it's different for every company, but we saw a lot of shipping companies back out and say, we're just not going to risk that at all. So the threat is still there today because all it takes is one missile or one drone or one unmanned surface vessel attempting to hit a commercial vessel could be enough for other ships to say, we're not going to risk it. It's still not safe. So think about what has to be done to effectively degrade the Houthi threat. It's not knocking out 90% of their military stockpiles. It's not 98% of their leadership. They have to completely do away with any idea, because realistically, we're not going to be able to eliminate 100% of their weapons capabilities. They have to do away with any idea of ever even considering launching any sort of munition in the general vicinity of a commercial vessel. That's a big ask, and it's going to require a lot more, again, than just U.S. airstrikes. At the very least, going to require a pretty significant partnered effort as well. But again, that's what we know right now as of the most recent wave of U.S. airstrikes in Yemen. But we'll keep an eye on this and update you as more information comes available. That's all I got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.